Welcome to our Kepler College Community Webinar Series. Today I'd like to introduce astrological researcher Russ von Oelhausen. For more than 25 years, Russ has studied comparative philosophy, science, religion, and metaphysics, even traveling extensively in Southeast Asia, including Nepal and Tibet. He now splits his time between eco-friendly architectural design and his passion, research into how to reintegrate the ancient wisdom and science into our modern life. And now, here's Russ.
Thank you for having me. Let's start by taking a look at this image, as it explains so much of what we're going to talk about today.
This is an amazing find on the south pole of Saturn. And as soon as we came up with the idea to do this webinar, the first thing that came to mind was to use this image, because this is something that's sort of a mystery to a lot of scientists and a lot of people who are wondering what's happening at the South Pole. Why is this clear hexagon occurring? If you study sacred geometry, you understand the fundamental energy and the presence with the forces at play in the cosmos. It's not so much a mystery, and we're going to explore exactly why that forms. It's not air currents, as science currently believes it to be. This is the rundown about me, in case you're interested in any of the details. Currently serving as the Vice President here at the Astrological Society in Austin. This is the title and the description of the series that we started out with a few years ago, Celestia Mathematica. It really describes primarily the mathematical portions of what we were coming up with, how the mathematics of Fibonacci Sequence, prime numbers, pi, all begin to show something that relates directly to the zodiac. But it sort of evolved into something more. And we classified the overall title, Celestia Mathematica. This is based on similar ideas that in the medieval period they used terms like this. Principia Mathematica was the term, I believe it was Newton who did that, to describe the forces of gravity that were occurring that you could see mathematically. So we just gave this an astrological term. What we're trying to get at, though, is we're trying to understand what it is that moves all things, what it is that animates all things. So the presence of the fundamental force seems like a really good way to approach what is happening in the cosmos. This is the part that actually includes the movement of energy in form, in structure, that we're trying to understand, not just simple numbers on a page, what it looks like in our reality. To many people, astrology is just this. It's nothing more than looking at a natal chart and trying to understand what it means either to the person involved in the natal chart or to someone that they're connected with as a client. They don't have any clue that astrology is actually more than just that. I have always looked at astrology as a true personal path map. When you look at a natal chart, it is a path map that involves the natural cosmic forces that are out there working together right now, just like sunlight and gravity and electromagnetism. They're all out there doing their thing, functioning in this interwoven world that we're a part of. This is exactly the same thing that modern science is trying to get at. They spend trillions of dollars trying to understand the core of the natural forces at play. And we're doing the same thing. By the way, this chart happens to be notorious Charles Manson. Just in case anyone was curious, he was very charismatic, as you can see. Many people consider astrology to be a lot of different things. And one of the things I find that even astrologers seem to come up with is astrology is not science. I have a completely opposite view that astrology is science that has to be dealt with in the same language as modern science is dealing with it. And only a few people are considering it that way and doing that. Many people consider it just to be an art, that it's something like painting, music, anything else, and in many ways it is, but it's not just that. They think it should be a mystery, it should remain that way. It's not meant to be understood. They just practice. Many people consider it to be an occult practice, particularly from a religious point of view. What you see is people look down upon it as if it's something almost in the satanic realm to even think about. I even read something just the other day that astrology was satanic, according to a large percentage of the Christian population, which I find very, very amusing. But on the other side, many people who are atheists consider astrology to be very religious, that it has a religious tone because it's dealing with spirit and evolution of of a person's pathway in their soul. So they qualify at the opposite direction as religion. Many people think of it as a higher form of a psychic technique, and that kind of throws it into the realm of superstition. Many people consider it psychotherapy. Psychotherapy, many counselors and psychologists use astrology with their practices of psychotherapy, and sometimes it gets qualified just as that. In India, you would look at it more of a way to predict. So all of these things may apply. I look at it as a map of time, that anywhere the planets are, you can determine a time in the 3D reality of space-time. When you look at a natal chart, it's when your life formed. So it is a map of time, where it came from, where it's going. Many people in the Hermetic schools look at it as a symbolic language, that it's really symbols connect us to something higher. The pathways of the zodiacal symbols and the planetary symbols can guide us to higher learnings through our own evolution of the soul in an alchemical format. I have a lot of the same beliefs along that. The one thing most people all agree is that it still qualifies as pseudoscience, that there's not enough information out there to determine it as an empirical science. I happen to be not one of those people. I actually fall under the belief that it is pure science. There are elements that we have not yet connected the dots. We are currently doing so and beginning to show that it does not fall entirely under any of those categories, that it actually is a part of science. Once all of the connections finally get made, and all of the information that we need to understand it as an empirical, spiritual blend of science are already there. You can put them together, put these bits of information together, begin to form a roadmap, and that's kind of what we're going to start doing right now. Astrology may be a little bit of any one of those things. You may be very attached to any one of those concepts, but it is also a path of energy and pure information that flows through all systems within the field of time. It is information, and we know how to read it, and it is the information that creates us. Today we're going to look at a few of these areas very quickly. What I'd like to ask you to do, now we've got a little bit of the primer out of the way, strap on your seatbelts, and we're going to go for a pretty quick ride here. Hopefully we have some basic understanding in the fundamental forces of nature. I gave a listing earlier of what those were. Quantum mechanics, just some basic. Hopefully someone's seen a television program somewhere that they understand what quantum field is, and string theory. It's been around for a long while now. Hopefully we know some of about that. Integral number theory, we're going to explain and hit hard how that begins to show the imprint of what we're looking at. This is like the fingerprint of the divine force. Geometric structure is the actual pattern that we begin to see arise from this energetic imprint. Through geometry, scaffolding is created of which all matter forms upon, and all flows through to give us our physical form and our psychological makeup. In the process, we're going to also deconstruct the essence of the zodiac. This is not guaranteed how it was done. We don't know exactly how. The ancients began to put together this structure, but we can definitely see that the pattern was revealed to them in some way without what we would consider modern technology. There's the pattern of the structure of atoms, the pattern of the way nature reveals itself. It's all there and was somehow shown to the ancients, and they, across the planet, in every culture, they did this. And they all did it based on the same type of pattern and sequence that you can see it through number series and sacred geometry. So the nature of energy. Let's just take a quick refresher on what energy is about. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Nikola Tesla is a hot topic these days. These three things, energy, frequency, and vibration, describe the nature of everything. He referred to it as the prime secret of the universe, and he's not the only one. Several people have gotten at the same idea in different periods of time, that this is the way to look at the world, not through material eyes, but through energetic eyes. The nature of force and form. What are we talking about? When you think of energy, some people think of energy you put in your car. They think of gasoline. They think of batteries and how much energy that you may find in those. Other people think of electricity and those forms of energy. And they're correct. There's no difference in that type of energy. It may be a little less conscious. But then there's spiritual energy. The spiritual movement discusses spiritual energy. Is it the same type of energy? In essence, it is. It's the same type of energy. But how do we quantify it? How do we talk about it? How do we begin to understand it more than just some etheric, ambiguous thing? Quantum physics and metaphysics are definitely on a collision course. They have been for a while. And quantum mechanics has been around for over a century now. It's been tested, and attempts to prove the basics of that there is a core idea of string theory and quantum physics that are out there functioning in the universe that make all matter. Metaphysics has said the same thing for centuries. Quantum physics and metaphysics one day, hopefully, will reintegrate, and we'll begin to call these things real science once again. Just as a quick idea of what we're getting at, let's take a look at this. This is a chart of the basic standard model of quantum physics. This is fermions and bosons, quarks, leptons, gauge bosons, and the Higgs boson. This chart was not drawn by me. This is a standard model that you will see anywhere online in any textbook of what it looks like. But you see quadrants that are represented by 4 particles, and then you have an outside ring that is represented by 12 divisions of those 4 particles, and it goes so on and so on and so on until, and there's infinite number of these subatomic particles. Does anyone see any similarity between that and this? There's a center core around the Earth, around you. It all relates to that which is outside of us in an extended energetic field. We call this the zodiac. So I put this to you just right off the bat, thinking of it in these terms. A multitude of competing models of quantum string theory have failed. They have failed repeatedly. We've spent billions on trying to prove quantum mechanical models that have come up and they've been in error. But just because quantum mechanics is not perfect, we don't throw the whole theory out. There's elements all through quantum mechanics that show that it does speak to the higher reality. Astrology is exactly the same. People should not throw out astrology just because we don't understand it fully yet. Same way with quantum theory. We're not doing that. As a matter of fact, we just fired up the Hadron Collider again I think it was about a month ago, to get a little deeper, to go a little further, to understand what's happening out there. I'm talking 40 years and billions and trillions of dollars spent on this thing, and we're going for another round to search for the cosmic forces, the same cosmic core that permeates our astrological understanding in these passive energy and light. And when we talk about form, I mean everything has to do with this form. One of the things that I studied early on was the patterns in people's faces, astrological connections between the way people look in their birth charts, not just their sun sign, not just their moon or ascendant, but what a chart looks like compared side by side with another person's chart. This is Richard Dawkins, and this is Emma Watson. Hopefully you know one of the other of these people. They're both Aries. They have very similar charts, and you can see very clearly in these photos that they express the same type of energy. It is coming through. Why is this? Because you are alive because of and with this force. This force is part of breath, and it finds its pathway in your physical form, in your body, and expresses itself through your form. And if we have time towards the end of this, I did post a few photos and actual charts. We can have a little fun with that. If we have some extra interest, we'll do that. But that's not what this particular lecture is all about. Let's think about this thing for a second. That which is that. This is a phrase that you hear within spiritual circles, within Buddhist idea, the word that. So what is this thing we're trying to describe? The thing that drives astrology. That drives humanity, people, that flows through the universe, and everything that is in it. In Buddhism, in Sanskrit, in Tibet, you will find the word dahat, which means that. That which is. That which all that is. This is what there is, and that's all that there is. It's just that. That is the essence, in a single word, what they would refer to as this force that you are a part of, the one thing. Science describes these forces a little differently. This is the idea of a fundamental force that you would read about in any science book. I think this is taken off of Wikipedia, actually. A fundamental interaction as patterns of relationships within physical systems over time, time being the key, whose objects appear not to be reducible, cannot be reduced any further. Gravity is not reducible any further in its fundamentality. It is as low as it can get in its fundamental force. The others being the electromagnetic combination of forces and the strong and weak nuclear forces. These dynamics are within a continuous field. We're within the field of this reality, of this three-dimensional field plus time. A property whose object is transferable between them. Something that I want to point out here is that in this definition, you cannot separate the force from the field. The field is the force, and the force is the field. Everything arises and goes back into this energetic shape, this toroidal field, as we would call it. I don't know if people know what that's about. It's like a giant donut that's always whirling inside and out. This is what drives the universe and how we see it in this three-dimensional reality. Other names for this thing that have been thought of recently and over the centuries, just cosmic energy. It's also the unified field, the grand unified field theory. You hear people looking at that all the time, the theory of everything, TOE. The Force, this is a good sci-fi term. Everyone who's seen Star Wars knows what we're talking about. It's why do you think people got so excited when they heard for the first time, "May the Force be with you"? It's because they got it on a spiritual level, subconsciously. They understood what was happening. We're talking about reintegrating this idea simply by calling it the Force, reintegrating it with ourselves. That's why it was very popular. Animus, this is a term used by Carl Jung. He understood that this was the animating force of all matter. And prana, you would see this term in the Vedic schools of thought, Hinduism. And there's probably plenty of others that are out there that you could probably think of that I didn't have on this list. Let's think about it in a different term. Let's think about it in equations, in terms of equations. E equals mc squared. Everybody knows what that's about. Albert Einstein came up with this. It relates to energy, mass, and the speed of light. These are things that we are talking about. Matter, energy, and what makes up matter, light, and how it functions. Energy that is supplied through the cosmic field. And in this lower little description down here, what's interesting is you see the equation broken down in reverse. E on this side, E equals mc squared. It's energy that flows in to create matter, that it functions through energy. Again, even in the equation, you see this toroidal action in your mind, this flow of high density level of energy to low density and a reemergence into a higher state, just like life. It's like all matter has to go through this particular process. Behavior and structure. Light and sound are described in terms of their behaviors. Interesting to think of light and sound having behaviors. We don't talk about a lot of other things in terms of behavior, but light and sound behave in certain ways based upon their frequency, modulation, amplitude. These affect what's happening with the behaviors of light and sound models. Natal astrology is an attempt to understand these human behaviors. All forms, including human beings, are coalescent, ever-increasing complex cosmic energy of behaviors. We are made of light, and light is doing its thing through us. This is how the world came into being, and it is how it functions in the field of time. One of the ways to get at this and understand early on was noticing wave patterns. We call this study today cymatics. Cymatics is vibrations made visible, because sound is the scaffolding of matter. Everything owes its existence solely and completely to sound. And when we say sound, we mean vibration, and we mean its frequency, its harmony. We also refer to this as light as well. There's a combined wave form and particle form structure that happens throughout sound and light. We call it sonoluminescence, light sound. Everything works in this fashion and owes its existence to this concept. This is what the early cymatics would look like. They would just take glasses of fluid or water and put sound through it and come up with different wave structures. But they must have seen this a long time ago, because they were creating very intricate mandalas based on the same idea as sacred form, that this was connected to something higher, that this high vibration was literally connected to what the vibration they were seeing on lower form. And they would put this in sacred works. These are just some ideas of what we were talking about, different waveforms, different wave patterns and structures that emerge by emitting sound into water or a form of liquid that it can reveal itself. It reveals itself as the voice of the fundamental force. In religion, you would think of this as the voice of God. In the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God. It's just another way of looking at these things. No matter how you think, they were trying to grasp an idea that relates exactly to what science is trying to grasp today. What is the core of all things? This study, Caldini, I believe, in the 1780s, he formed these pictures. He drew drawings about his little study of the wave patterns that he was showing, and you can begin to see that he already was aware that amplitude and frequency played a part. These are early photographs of the first studies of amplitude and Cymatica. In fact, everything that exists is frequency patterns made by them. This is wonderful. I love this quote by physicist David Bohm. A noun is nothing more than a slow verb. Everything that is matter is also vibration. It's just in a different form. When we see a rock, it's energy. It is vibrating. It's just very, very slow in the field of time and how we relate to that. It's only a rock temporarily. It is in action always. The whole universe is in action. We just choose to delineate whether we call something a noun or a verb based upon its speed, or use the verb as a relationship to its action in the field. And just like sound, numbers represent the points where vibrations meet. So why do we have a limited number of integral digits, or 9 digits? It's because these are the primary points where, when you're looking at energy, how they meet. So that's why you have divisions of notes within music. They continually repeat. That raise in higher octave and lower octave. Numbers represent these points. The primary separations can be shown. There's a concept called the Fourier Transform. The Fourier Transform is how all of that information that's coming into us through the field of our reality in the flow of time is picked up by us through the senses. We compute that in a particular mathematical form called the Fourier Transform, and it is based on mathematical sequence. I won't get into that because it's extremely complex. I don't like to think in these terms, but I just wanted to point out that even our faculties are involved in this complex sensing behavior of the world around us that relates to a mathematical equation, constantly computing what's going on around us. And we know how it's done. This is one of my favorite comedians, Bill Hicks. He's long passed away, but he had these words to say once these things were revealed to him.
Today, young men realize that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration, that we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There is no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we're the imagination of ourselves.
This is what is happening. So if we can look at this way, everything is energy that creates infinite degrees of pattern at all points in the universe. We relate this pattern through the study of number. Hopefully most of you have seen this relationship to spirals. There's lots of little videos out there. It's not studied in school, but how the spiraling action, the vortex motion of the field of energy actually creates form that we can see easily around us. Some of these forms are of course, the sunflower. There's a very, very complex and intricate number pattern happening there, but nature does it so simply. It's expressing itself upon itself. So it knows what it's doing. Pine cones the same way. You see this. This is a wonderful image of a cabbage. You can actually begin to envision upon this cabbage the swirling galaxy that's inside. As without, so within. This cabbage actually has a galaxy inside it in more ways than one. But you can understand this by the numbers. Galaxies are, again, part of the same type of structure, just on a higher order of magnitude. And of course, our galaxy is no exclusion. This is what it looks like, and that's right there where we are within this little part of the universe. So when you begin to look closer at these things, you begin to count, see what's being sculpted from nature. You can begin to count numbers and see that these are happening in a pattern. The same thing is happening with astrology. That's where we break everything down to categories and patterns. Same way. We're going to show that. Again, sunflower, this is the mapping of the center of the sunflower and what it has in common with the pattern of. I believe I took this little picture. We found it in a neighborhood a couple of years ago, but how these little flowers bunched up together like this formed very closely to what we see here in a sacred pattern. We would know this as the template, the flower of life. This is almost like the vocal cords of the voice of God and how everything emerges through this voice. So let's look at number, the nature of number. What is the structure of number and what does it really mean? Let's go right to the Fibonacci sequence. Let's take a little refresher first. hopefully people here know what Fibonacci was about, what he did, and what he's famous for. He was a great mathematician, and so much of mathematics has evolved from his books, the Liber Abaci. He wrote that, and mathematics, as we think of in modern terms, arose from that. But he developed this sequence as it was revealed to him in the Middle Ages. It had already been known to ancient cultures. It was known throughout India in ancient times, and you can see this throughout Egypt as well, in structures, sacred structures that reveal this particular sequence. In essence, it's just a sequence of numbers that breaks down 0 as a seed, 1 and 1, it divides itself, then it begins to add itself. 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 5 plus 8 is 13, 13 plus 21, and so on and so on. In ad infinitum, it just goes on forever. This ratio begins to form the spiral, the golden mean, by adding these numbers and using them in form. Thinking about numbers, I want to introduce the concept of an indig. Many of you may be familiar with the idea of an indig through integral digit. This term means indig is just integral digit. It's also known as a digit sum. It relates to, in some ways, numerology. Any of you out there who studied astrology, maybe come from a path of numerology or other forms of divination, may have done some things that relate to getting to an integral digit that forms in a number. If you look at this number right here, 1387562, if you add all those numbers up until there's only one digit, you keep adding it into itself, that indig is 9, the integral digit of 9. But where the numbers actually come together, you would think of the stuff that's there at the integral digit as the core of its nature. Its essence becomes a light, sound, or energy particle when it's involved in the energy flow through matter. My search began years and years ago by trying to find pattern in pi. This is what pi looks like with each digit encoded. Each little speck on that screen is each digit encoded into a color for pi, and that goes out to 786,432 places. Obviously, I was unable to find any pattern. I set my ego onto doing so, and I was disappointed through that search. This down here in this corner is what it looks like in a field of over 1 million places. It's just a lot of nothing. It doesn't seem to reveal any structure to itself. But what I began to find is what we think of as pi is not actually what the ancients thought of as pi. We have gotten very detailed and very specific over what pi must be. Pi is an ever-increasing ratio of numbers that never will find an end. Try this, though. If you have an iPhone, calculator, computer app, pop this into your calculator. 22 divided by 7. See what you get. This is what we think of as the number of common pi, 3.14159, and numbers continuing out. But here's what the ancients considered as cosmic pi, what they were basing understanding on. What we see here is 3.142857, 142857, 142857, repeating. They built this into the structures. They wanted us to learn something from this, which we started digging around at the grains of sand and not looking at magnificent structure that's right in front of us. We were looking in the wrong place for what all of this represents, in my opinion. So I turned my attention to other things. One of those things is expanding my understanding of mythology. I got into understanding parables and religion. And this is a quick little tangent. Numbers, what I found, are considered sacred in every religion and culture throughout the world. That there's something revealed here. Anybody who's studied the Kabbalistic schools knows gematria is rife with, all it is number theory, that the whole world is number. And they're in many ways right. But these things these ideas of math evolved alongside with myth, and they are put into myth. In the Bible, they're put into parables. Evolved alongside with myth, and they are put into myth. In the Bible, they're put into parables, for example. Parables are, in essence, cosmic math puzzles, just like trying to solve pi. It's trying to tell us in an allegorical form that there's something there we need to discover. This particular image I have here is the Tower of Babel, which I did a lecture on religious parables and how they related to astrology. During the age of Gemini, this parable would have occurred. What it's referencing is the ancient age of Gemini, having to do with language. And if you look at this on its parallel myth in the Greek legends, it had directly to do with Mercury destroying this tower, which again ties in planets to the myth and eventually into what's happening in a numerical pattern. Most Christians tend to forget about the math or the astronomy in the Bible. There are over 216 references to celestial motions, to signs, to astrologers, to references to the heavens directly that have to do with what we would call modern-day astrology. As a matter of fact, the fourth book of the Bible is actually called Numbers. Many people don't know that, or don't think of it in those terms, that there's something there that has to do, very important, with numbers. So let's look at some number patterns. What I'd like to do now is shift gears into number frequency, number flow, and think in terms of waves, waveforms. I did this chart years and years ago, but took a number pattern across the center line and revealed a flow of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and so forth, in a wave pattern right through here. But what began to reveal itself was a secondary flow of 1, 4, 7, 10, 13, 16, 19, 22, and so forth. But what you begin to notice, if you look very closely, is that if you go into the idea of integral digits, 1 plus 0 is 1, 1 plus 3 is 4, 1 plus 6 is 7, and then so forth. 1 plus 9 is 10, which also comes back to 1 plus 0 is 1. So you get a repeating number of 147, 147, 147 in this flow of numbers. In the what I'm calling the evens line, 2, 5, 8, 2, 5, and 1 plus 7 is 8, 2, 5, and 8, to infinity. Everything continues to flow in the same pattern. And of course, 3, 6, and 9 does exactly the same. So all these wave patterns of energy begin to reveal something that shows patterns of 147, 258, and 369. And of course, and there's also an interrelated pattern that shows up that when you add those waves together, they all come back to 3, 6, and 9. So we took this idea from a line, and I like to deal with circles. I'm an astrologer. I like to see things laid out in circles. We took this idea and we began to wrap it in a spiral around a central circle and see what that would reveal. What I'm showing here is that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and they are in a particular pattern coming out from a spiral, and this pattern, it reveals itself in the arms of this spiral. For a quick example, we'll come up here and we'll take this last number on this row. If you can see it, it's 152. 1, 5, and 2 equal 8. It is on the row that equals 8. All numbers are along this row, all integral digit down to, or indig down to, the number 8. 1 plus 7, 2 plus 6, 3 plus 5, 4 plus 4, 5 plus 3, 6 plus 2, 7 plus 1. All the numbers along that line equal the integral digit of its original creation. So let's look at this little central spiral a little closer. It must be important. This central spiral is called, already well known, the Vedic circle of math. Around this, you can begin to understand concepts that flow through nature and that flow through our mathematical systems. Most all cultures have all come back to using single digits up to 9 as their base, calling it a base 10 system if you include 0. So in this little diagram, what we're looking at is 0 is the circle. You see it slightly shown here as a hazed out number, but 0 is fully inside the circle. We come around to an equal portion, what would be 40 degrees. The arc circle is 40 degrees. Would be number 1, and it is one portion of that circle over the line here revealed. Number 2 is also 40 degrees away and is 2 portions. Number 3 has 3 portions, and 4 has 4, and 5 portions outside the circle, and 6, 7, and 8 until you come around. 9 is completely outside the circle at the same point as the 0 would be, and it reveals itself to be a reflection of 0. There's a relationship to circles that all relate these concepts of none, or nothing, or null, or 9, to the word 9, the number 9. Even on the clock, on our clock, we look at noon. When the numbers turn to 12 and 12, We call that noon. That means none or null, or it also means at the position of 9. Looking at this in co-relationships, we begin to bring some of these numbers into focus. What we've done here in this particular chart is break down this number pattern, this Vedic circle, into halves. So there's a light half and a dark half. We have, on the light half of the circle, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, if we take those numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4, on that half, they add up to 10, or the indig 1. On the other half, 5, 6, 7, and 8 add up to indig 8, which you add the two together, 26 equals 8. Make sure we say that. You add the two halves together, and that equals, of course, 1 plus 8 is 9. If you add the center pole, it still totals 9. The total sum is 9 in the circle. 8 plus the center pole of 9 plus the side other half is 1 is 18. 1 plus 8 again is 9. You can do the reverse if you subtract. It's exactly the same. So that's the division if you divide it right down the middle and half along a pole. So what if you divide it other ways? What do we get? You take around what we call the sacred trinity of 3, 6, and 9. You take the numbers around that. For example, around the 9, it is revealed that 1 and 8 are essentially its essence of the number 9. But if you add, again, 1, 8, and 9, you come up with 9. If you add 2, 3, and 4, 2 plus 3 is 5, plus 4 is 9. On the other half, 5 plus 7 totals to 12. And if you break that down, 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 6 is 9. So a lot of people don't know that numbers relate in that way, that they center around this concept of 3, 6, and 9. But it goes much deeper than that. What's the remainder of those concepts? 7 and 8 is 15. It is opposed. This is where the field of opposites begin to come into play. If you look at 7 and 8, that's 15, which is 6. Opposed 3 is 9. 1 plus 2 is 3. Opposing 6 is 9. 5 plus 4 is 9. Opposing 9 itself, all totaling 9. Now, we won't go over all of these, but just for the sake of being rigorous, I went ahead and divided this up in every possible way you can think of, and I've shown a few of these charts here. It begins to form patterns, which you see in this particular one. If you interlace a couple of these concepts, you begin to see sacred geometry forming. Not just a simple 120-degree on an arc triangle, but you see its opposite in gravity, in what we would consider gravity cells or centers where nothing exists. Nothing is here, nothing is here, nothing is here, but if you total the two, they come out to its reflective property of 9. No matter how you divide this circle, you can always come back to some form of unity. That's what makes the Vedic circle of 9 so interesting and so intriguing. Now, again, I won't go through all of these, but if you're interested, this presentation is in interactive format online, and you can play with it, get a little closer details, see what you want to see. But what is all this getting at? What does it represent? I wanted you to get familiar with some patterns, with number patterns, before we went into the next part of this. Think of these things as energy that is attached to a scaffold. This energetic scaffold is what creates reality. Everything is energy. We know that through basic mathematics, basic quantum understanding of E equals mc squared. But if everything is energy, and it all interacts and forms lower and higher densities, how is it structured? We know this as the Platonic Solids. They figured this out a long time ago. This was something that Pythagoras began to understand, and probably long before that was well understood. It's been lost and refound many times. We're refinding it again. But that energetic pattern is what helps create, or it is what creates, what you see there in that image is another shot of the South Pole of Saturn. It creates all shape in space. It creates all shape in gravity fields like Earth. What we see around us, all life, all biological form and function, is just the same type of energy that's being expressed inside the field of the Earth, inside gravity, endless and infinite ways. So let's look at the basic shape first. This is the heliosphere. This is the structure of the solar system and the extended sun influence. It's about as far out as the sun's gravity tends to interact with other particles, things before it comes in line with another dense field of energy that is controlled probably by some other gravity field. But this is what it looks like in a large way. Most people don't think of it in this way. But along the middle of this, he's created this disk, where we call this disk the ecliptic. This ecliptical plane is where we get the zodiac. Everything is describing movements within the area around the solar field and how it functions within this ecliptic. This is another shot of the Saturn Hex, very clearly a hex, not caused by wind. The outside circle around that, of course, is circular. You see the spiraling form in the middle. Gravity is in full force happening around that little epicenter. Here is, now again, Saturn, of course, is one of the gas giants. What you're seeing is all atmosphere. But what you would see in solid form on 4 Vesta, this is a satellite image that came in, I think, in 2012, and it is of the south pole of Vesta. You begin to see this triangulated triangle that's formed in solid matter, right where we would expect to find something of that nature. All the energy forms expressed geometrically, including planets. We can see this very clearly by overlaying a geometric form of the sacred, or what's called the Merkaba, Star of David, however you look at it, and how the atmospheric patterns are flowing on Jupiter. You begin to see the lines fall right in place to where we would expect them along an energetic form. This is Neptune. Oh, well, let me slide back to Jupiter real quick. Of course, the Great Red Spot falls along this line. Neptune has revealed along the same latitude of 19.5, 19.47 to be generally, to be more accurate, is another great storm on Neptune in the same place on this planet. In solid form, on Mars, this is looking at Mars from the North Pole to South Pole on the center axis. Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in our solar system that we know of, is just below this line. Things move around, but it's right where you would expect something of that nature to be. A very active energy point on the planet. Same thing with Venus. Now, you can't see it so well on Venus, but along the 19.4 line latitude, we know that there are the alpha and beta regiovolcano systems, I believe, on either side of the planet, function as expression of the energy of the planet itself. These are interlocking forces, actually. So the space-time framework of spherical bodies is what we're getting at. Is in the field of time, through space, what emerges is matter or some other atmospheric type energy on a scaffold that all relates to this interlocking double tetrahedron, which is we also know in spiritual context as the Merkaba. This is just a basic form of what it looks like if there's two tetrahedron structures that are flowing within a sphere. This is where the points would actually line up. This is all geometry, exactly at 19.5 and across the equator. This is what the sun looks like. The most active regions are along a general axis of 19.5 latitude, north and south. We always find most solar activity cropping up along those lines. Not all things there. The sun is very complex. A lot of movement, interrelated movement that's happening internally as it moves that changes flow. And it's also interacting with all the planets as well. Now, on a side tangent, what most people don't understand about the sun is that it's way more than what you think of it as. The sun is actually, it's an interdimensional bubble in reality. It is equivalent to a black hole. The way we think of black holes is that they suck in all light. But everything at the center of every molecule, of every atom, of every cell is a nucleus, and that nucleus serves as an energy barycenter. The sun is no different. It's just very, very dense, so that it has become so dense that the energy has shifted from three-dimensional energy into multi-dimensional energy. And what you see there, this is the center of a very good shot of a black hole, is there's no sun there inside of that black hole. It's black because it's a black hole. What we have on the outside of a black hole is the event horizon. This is the event horizon of an interdimensional black hole. What you have in the center is a portal of convergent energy vortex, is what we've We call that a black hole. But all substance flows the same way. On the planet, the Earth's structure is of the same Merkabah energy. It's just not as dense. It's not as dense as the sun, so it doesn't fire. It doesn't turn into from matter to plasma as the sun has done. This is it's remained very hot at its core, but it's still low vibrational enough to remain solid form as we think of solid form. But along those lines, this is what it would look like to think of a Merkabah within the Earth at the same locations, 19.47 along a 120 degree triangle. We find Hawaii. The tip of the prime volcano there, one of the prime volcanoes there, is found at 1949, I believe, along that line. But more interesting is if you're looking from the North Pole and you're looking down on this double tetrahedron, there are volcanoes or volcanic systems at most of these points. This chart, we can begin to see that volcanic activity occurs along 19.5 north and south in each of these places, whether it's undersea or the ones that emerge like in Hawaii. Energy is flowing underneath these structures. But what I'd like to look at is the ecliptic of all of these systems. The ecliptical plane of the sun and the ecliptical plane of the Earth, they're all related gravity systems. It's where the concentrated energy of those two sacred structures or energy structures merge and create the plane or that disk of the heliosphere. It's how we map the orbits of planets and how we map and structure zodiac. Let's go into a little more science, and then we're going to get into something else. Hopefully people are familiar with Lagrange. He was a French mathematician and scientist, and he came up with Lagrangian mathematics, Lagrangian theory of how two bodies work together in a gravity system. And what he came up with basically this, that around the central point of two bodies, so you take the sun and the Earth, for example, in an orbit, they create gravity wells, gravity densities, which come out to or wave out to create orbits. Along this orbit, there are places where energy is more dense, where energy field. There's nothing really there on the Earth's orbit. There's a collection of dust. Actually, they've been there and checked it out at L4 and L5. But at these points, which are 60 degrees fore and 60 degrees aft along the orbit, and also at 180 degrees on this particular system, at those orbits are higher energy or higher gravity wells, creating a gravity structure. In this case, it looks like a topographical map or a type of weather map of where energy is flowing. This is how it looks. If you're looking straight down on this ecliptical plane, we come up with L4, L3, and L5 form a perfect trine at 120 degrees on the arc circle, forming what is referred to in astrology as a grand trine. So even in the orbits of planets, you see structure is there. There is structure that we relate to within astrology. This is what it looks like with color applied. It's not just simple points. It's actually a flow of energy that forms concentrations of points of high and low density. That's what it looks like to look down upon any two-body system. This is just a general mapping of the system around Jupiter, for example. We do know there are things at the Jupiter orbit that are concentrated in these places. Earth orbit, there's nothing there. Mercury, Venus, there's nothing at these points. But as you go a little further out, at these points of L4, 3, and 5 are the Trajan and Hadean asteroid systems. So this little yellow dot over here represents Jupiter. In the center, approximately, I believe, is the Sun. And at these positions, which would be, we see forming a triangle here, the 120-degree triangle, are gravity wells that are strong enough to pull in other matter, other asteroids that have gathered. Through this system of gravity, I call it a gravity skeleton that functions throughout the solar system, NASA and JET laboratories have come up with a pathway to save money, to save energy on satellites that fly into deep space outside the solar system that allow them to navigate through this gravity structure that's through space. This is an image that's put out by, I believe, Jet Labs, and what they are actually doing to navigate gravity fields as we see them in space. So after all this talk, hopefully we begin to see that there's a big picture, there's geometrical structure that functions in a pattern that overlays energy flow that relates directly to what we call the zodiac. We're going to go into that and see what we're talking about. So let's get back to Fibonacci. Fibonacci, of course, did not take this any further than biological nature. We're beginning to understand that these systems are on orders of magnitude. The same systems that apply to the divisions of the Fibonacci numbers apply to the structure of atoms. They apply to all subatomic structures. They apply to biological form and to cosmological celestial form. This right here shows what we're about to get into with the Fibonacci sequence broken down into indigs, which show this form. The Fibonacci sequence is that same order of numbers we showed earlier. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and so forth. And the second column down here, what we've shown is those same numbers broken down into integral digits, into the digit sums. Go to the first one, that's 2 digits. 1 plus 3 is added up to 4. 2 plus 1 is added up to 3. 3, 4, 7, and so forth. And we've gone into the rows such as, take a larger number, just for example. Let's use 4, 6, 3, 6, and 8. 4 and 6 is 10, which adds to 1. 3 and 6 is already 9. So in the system of casting nines, which is something that was taught in school up until at least the 30s, casting out nines, you begin to add this number and see that 3 and 6 is 9, 4 plus 6 is 1 and 8. You have 1 9 and 2 9s equal 18 and 9. So this is just all reflected in the second row of integral digit sequence down below. And if you take the first 12 set of numbers where the first 9 meets, 1 plus 4 is 9. And the second 9 at this place, you take the first row of 12 and you add them in the second row of 12, and they all come up to 9. So there's no mystery here of what's happening. It's an order of completion of number systems that even most mathematicians don't really know that this exists. So what you're seeing here is sort of new. It's not entirely new. There are a handful of people who have discussed this over a decade or so. I happen to come across this. Being an astrologer, I break everything down into 12s and 3s and 6s and 9s, and I came across this by my own path. What you begin to see is that these numbers interrelate and interweave. But since I'm not a linear person, I like to think in terms of circles. I took all of that information and I put it on a circle. So the outside ring of this circle reflects the same thing as that linear chart. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. This is the Fibonacci sequence. The inner row is its integral digits, the second row. Same thing you saw. What we did on the next row is begin to add these integral digits within themselves. So 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 3 is 5, 5 plus 4 is 13 is 4. 4 plus 3 is 7, and so forth. So you come up with, in this secondary row, 2, 5, 4, 7, 8, 8, 7, 5, 4, 2, 1, 1. Across the middle there, you begin to see numbers that don't have any 3, 6s, or 9s directly in them, but must have some association to higher order of magnitude. So I applied that to what we know about the zodiac. We begin to get divisions of numbers, as if you take the second row here, you add them, you come back to get 12, a row of 12 again. This is essentially the same form that you see with the original Fibonacci sequence that is added into itself, and overlay zodiacal signs on top of that. Now, I won't go into reasons why we chose particular signs, but there are a lot of different reasons why we chose these signs to start and end the zodiac. But what you begin to see is that they add up to each sign relates to a number of the zodiac itself. In this chart, what I've done here is apply the numbers 1, 2, 5, 4, 7, and 8 to rulerships, and you can begin to see how that relates directly to the rulership of the sign. They all interlace with each other. So if you take sun and moon having the same dignity, we can understand this through medieval practice, that they have the same dignity. We give that an integer, we call that dignity of 1. We have Mercury, dignity of 2, and so forth. Venus is 5, Mars 4, Jupiter 7, and Saturn 8. We begin to see that the zodiacal pattern of the planets is interlaced right there in number theory of the Fibonacci sequence. Now, this is a little more detailed of the structure of what we're talking about. You can go back and look at any of these charts. But what begins to show, or begins to reveal itself, is that there, within the structure, are the same type of patterns of completion of 9 that you see within other structures of energy and matter that we've already discussed, based on the Platonic solids, of which even science today says is the structure of nature. You begin to see the same forms arise. We'll just show this one example. In this case, we'll say Leo and Aquarius, or pairs of opposites. They total 1 plus 8 is 9. Same thing with using Aries and Libra, and in this number chart that shows Aries as represented by 4 and Libra by 5. They add up to 9, and so forth. Through this pattern, you begin to see that there is an association here. Also, through using squares, using the squares of patterns, you can see that 1, 4, 8, and 5 all total, of course, their opposites equal 9, so squares would also equal a completion pattern of 9. Along all axes of the decans, for fun, I went ahead and threw the modern decan ship into the mix to see what would happen, and I tilted this up so the Cancer's at the top. In this case, you will see that along this pole, and only this polar axis, you get this pattern, that where Gemini and Cancer meet, this would also be the coordinate we would consider how the galactic center was determined. It is positioned in the same pattern that we see here. 1 plus 8 totals 9, 5, 4, 7, 2. All decans along what we would call the Antitia is one of the terms used for this, would relate even the decan order as well, all the way through the zodiacal pattern. Again, all polar pairs do the same thing. If you take, even not within the signs, you take the top, we have the same thing with Leo and Cancer. The polar pairs of the Sun, we would have 1 and 8, totaling 9, 1 and 8, 9. In this case, we come over to division of Sagittarius and Scorpio. We call this again a solar pair and a solar pair. They add up to 3 and 6, which of course totals 9. Again, this is mathematics. It's not numerology. It's not anything other than just looking at numbers in a pattern on a circle and seeing what they reveal. And they reveal the same structure as the zodiac. It reveals the zodiacal structure. And this has to have been something that the ancients picked up on in their own way and created this understanding and how it relates to human behavior and psychology. So if you want to check out more on this, without going into a lot of detail, David Cochran had really gotten involved in this. He did a number of videos. I put one here. We're not going to show it. We can't show it on this format, but you can go to this video through YouTube and link up to his YouTube channel, and there's several hours of information that David has integrated some of my charts and a couple of other mathematician astrologers who are working in this area. They've lined these things up so that you can begin to understand these in more detail, that there is a relationship between Fibonacci and prime numbers to what we're seeing revealed through mathematical structure. Another way to look at this is just for fun. Check this out. It's the relationship to the mean ratios and distances and the velocity of planets, and how they all relate in this exact same form, like a spiral. When you take the mean relationships, they form a structure as well. Same thing happens with DNA. Our DNA. This really gets to the core of as above, so below. DNA functions in the same way. We call it the double helix spiral. The way we break it broken down into its basic code. See, the same thing is revealed. Also, not just the fact that it is a spiral and it does relate as a double helix. It's actually divided in the same ratio, 21 to 34, which is one of the ratios, close to phi ratio, by the way, that you see in the Fibonacci pattern. Again, another shot of breaking down each of the molecules to planets. Some attempt there to make some relationship to each molecule and how it relates to our solar system and how the planets form this spiral. We are just about wrapped up here. So if you take this form a little further, you begin to see that it forms each of our individual human structures the same way. It affects our form. I will leave this here for now and see what Donna's doing. We have some zodiac faces there at the end to see biological form and function in relationship to ourselves if we have time. If not, Donna, how are we doing?
We are almost out of time. You have about 10 minutes.
Well, let me ask real quick. I didn't give much of a breather. Does any of the chat room have any questions? No one interjected?
Oh, I always have questions, but I can't see the chat room either. So I hope somebody like Enid or Karen, who's on the call,
Oh, okay.
can
Well, no worries.
throw those
You know
in.
what?
There are a couple comment
Okay, sure.
I had to get my mic unmuted. There are a couple comment questions.
Sure.
There's, well, one that basically everybody in the chat room can share is a link to a YouTube video that also has a math that's connected to some of the work that you're doing. And another comment from the theosophical studies. You know, in the turn of the century, there was a huge interest in the inner math, sacred math, and that the zero circle relates very much to the mundane egg, which the Hindu believed in the beginning of all, and that they also have that pi is a holy number representing the beginning of creation. So it's kind of fascinating seeing that connection.
Right.
And another comment is they hope very, very much that you have a list of some resources besides just the one from David Cochran of places to go explain more. And well, here's a question. Agree totally that science will provide the links between all fields. Do you think the coincidences of pattern relate to the spin of the bodies causing a harmonic of energy?
Spin of the bodies. Well, my first thought is yes to that. Everything is related in this way. Everything is revealing itself. Everything is required to have movement in the field of time. So spin is movement that you see everywhere. Every tornado, every hurricane, every planet, every galaxy, it's all in movement and spin in the field of time around a central point. And whether the energy fields around that come into discord or into harmony is an opinion, I hate to say, but it's all doing work of transformation. The whole universe is transforming. Yes, it all relates and it all knows what it's doing. It's an infinite field of information that it has anything. It relates to us, but it's doing its own thing, whether we know what it is or not. So yes, it does. It all connects.
So there's also a question about applying this to our work with charts. Are you finding that when you see techniques or descriptions that fit into this numerical pattern, that you're more inclined to work with those or finding better results with that? Or have you gotten to that point yet?
That's a very good question, actually. So how does it apply to practical use technique and whatnot? I do find that there are some techniques or some patterns that are definitely more, I want to say, effective. Also, there's something happening there with related resonance of energy fields that we see through number system that we also see in the charts. So the further away you get from an exact trine, the less effective. But just as a basic example, that's true. There are other techniques that I think become more and more complex. It's an ever-increasing complex order. So the more you want to get into it, the more refined you can make those relationships. But definitely, when you see something that relates to this, that adds up, and in this case, what's showing as the number 9 is an order of completion, you begin to see the energy is higher or more at work in someone's chart.
Then another question, you went very quickly over the decans. Wishing you could maybe go a little bit back there, a little bit more in depth, and wondering if you finding this pattern with decan work in your own astrological work, how you might be applying it.
Well, yeah, I use it in personal work, in larger thinking, and I'll explain that really fast. So when we think of on a large scale of time, not just in an individual chart, but we look at a large scale of time, we're moving away from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. So as we transfer this age, we're moving backwards through the age of Aquarius, beginning with the Libra decan. We also understand that we're moving into the other age of Leo as well, as it's opposite. Everything works in pairs of opposites. So looking at these things through the decan eyes, through the decadence, we begin to see that there is a relationship that becomes very important. Now, I don't get too much into that the personal charts and whatnot. There's, some people believe in the more modern rulerships with deacons, and other people, they follow the Ptolemaic decanate system. And there has been some work done to show that both are valid. I haven't spent enough time to show exactly the relationship with those systems, but a friend of mine in the Netherlands actually mapped out a chart a couple of years ago and showed me that there was, we were talking about this, and they applied it to the traditional deaconship. They showed very clearly that there was something going on in the division of deacons. So there's a lot more work that has to be done in this area. Anyone who wants to take a piece of that and do some research, I've got plenty to do. If you want to give me your feedback, let me know what you come up with. We can talk about it and refine it and see what's going on. So this is all research in progress. These are for a while there, back at the end of last year, more information was just coming out by a network of astrologers. It was getting a lot of people hyped, and we're going to get that energy back again. But again, this is a work in progress. This is not just something that's written in a textbook anywhere. This is kind of a one-of-a-kind way of looking at things right now. Hopefully one day people will be able to integrate this more into their thinking, how it all works. So.
Well, there is one other question on this sort of correlation, and just wondering if it's anything that you've seen where the correlation between astrological aspects and the latest form of earthquakes and volcanoes, and whether that's anything that's played into any of this research of yours.
Well, if you follow ley lines begin to show that ley lines are an energy grid that maps across the planet. We can definitely see that interesting to mention, this last bout of earthquakes and volcanoes that we've had, they do tend to fall on these lines, on these ley lines that form these interlocking structures within the planet. I am not positive on why each one of them. There are people out there doing the work on earthquakes and predicting them, but I do know that they see these more often than not in these areas where energy would arise. I am skeptical on some of them. Every time a leaf falls or the earth shakes, I don't know if it's exactly laying near a line, but there's got to be some relationship. It's so complex and so infinite that it's hard to see without a lot of study and understanding that there is a pattern, and second, what that pattern is. So there's a lot of work out there to be done.
Yeah, I was talking with Bruce Schofield this last week, and he was talking about how his work on the meteorology, on the weather and planetary, and that he knows a couple people working, and why am I forgetting which university he's connected to? Anyway,
MIT.
They're working on
MIT.
And they're working on climate change, and they're acknowledging, he's saying, you probably do need to take into account, as you're trying to tease out these relationships, the planetary sequences as well.
Right. I've heard a few people, and I've had a few discussions in chat rooms with people that are heavily involved in that. I would love to get into that. It may be a little more detailed. I'm more of a broad perspective kind of a person to see how can we simplify what we're seeing. And there are people out there, I think more Virgo type of people, like Donna, you may be interested in that, I'm not sure. But getting to some real raw evidence that you can put your hands on and show correlated data that gives rise to this association between planets and what's happening with weather. I know that it does work. I've seen it work. I just don't know exactly how. I wish I could say yes, I know, but it's even far more complex than I'm probably willing to go on some of that.
As you say, probably the best thing is getting the linkage between all you guys who are interested, all of us who like this stuff and can do pieces of research on it.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot of research, and it's a lot of research for one or two people to do. It needs a whole a hadron collider team of people to get in and really to see what's happening. I hope one day that the higher sciences do shift their energy over to this and begin to understand what's happening. It's slowly but surely it's happening. The one mind is not going to let this go away. It's going to keep nagging, us lower biological forms until we get on this, until we get on the subject. And what's going to happen is that it's going to be reintegrated in society the way it was in ancient times, where science was part of art, was part of our spiritual daily life, and it's going to take us as astrologers and those people who are more spiritually inclined, and it's going to take some very open-minded scientists to get off their high horse and to talk to us so that we can begin to create a dialogue and make that happen. But it will happen. It's going to happen. So
we've got one last, there's an amen to that comment. There's one last little question that evidently has been nagging. When you were talking about pi, the two different approaches to pi, do you know why there's one was selected over the other, or how it shifted?
Well, I have 3 books on the history of pi, and it seems to be rather political, if you want. My overall take on all of the opinions about it, it's more political. It emphasizes infinitude that goes on into nothing. It also, it doesn't show a corresponding relationship within itself. It shows randomness. It shows that the world is random, which supports a lot of science. The world is just random action. But when you get beyond that, you begin to see that there is an association, harmony that's there. And cosmic pi, ancient pi, showed that this was to be true. That when you do it a certain way, you don't have to bifurcate everything. That there are limits to how you look at dividing. So when you continue to divide pi into infinity, you get black hole nothingness, which is also true. The paradox about that is very true. It's just not something that reveals structure. When you stop at a certain level, it's like stopping at an atom and saying an atom is the smallest particle we're going to deal with. And then we went on and we found that there were more particles in subatomic, and we looked further, and that's exactly what happened with pi. The ancient understanding was that there was a barrier between orders of magnitude, and with cosmic pi, it shows that barrier in harmony. When you look beyond that, you go further, research in more detail, you begin to go into chaos. So both are true. It's just which one do you want to emphasize? I emphasize harmony and relationship. And so I'm kind of go back and I use the same number pattern that's also interesting, I forgot to mention. That is revealed in the Fibonacci sequence that we showed, the 258174 also is revealed in cosmic pi, the same order of numbers. There definitely is something that's happening there, and I keep referring back to ancient pi as probably being more important than where we place our emphasis today.
Well, thank you, Russell. This is fabulous.
Well,
and you do have definite requests from people that will actually make the presentation available, and I put the link in the questions, but when I send out the recording, actually I guess we can download the presentation, can't we, so that we can send that along with the recording?
We can download it, and anyone who wants to just go straight to it and interact and spend time on the presentation itself, it's on a Kansas format, and I think that link is on the front image. And inside that, I didn't show it here, there's a series of slides which we didn't get to, which just have to do with biological form and relationship. At the end, there will be a reference and link section.
Okay.
You just go right to that. So.
Yeah, because there are definitely requests for links to more information.
Well, they will be there.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone who attended today.
Well, thank you everyone. Thank you, Enid, and thank you, Kepler, for giving us this venue.